What would you do if a 15-year-old walked into Judge Caprio's courtroom looking like he didn't care, only to say 6 words that made a packed room forget how to breathe? Hit that subscribe button if you believe one honest apology can change a life, because this story starts with anger, turns into shock, and ends with a kind of justice most people never see coming. At 9:14 on a cold Thursday morning in Providence, everyone thought they already knew who the villain was. Drop a comment telling us whether you think teenagers should ever be shown mercy in court before you hear what really happened, because the first minute of this hearing made the whole room want punishment. The boy's name was Mateo Alvarez. He was 15 years old, 5'8", wearing a black Nike Tech fleece with the zipper half broken, gray Vans with the rubber peeling off the sides, and a red Jan Sport backpack slung over one shoulder like he had somewhere better to be. Like this video, if you believe appearances can fool people, because Mateo looked exactly like the kind of kid the gallery had already decided they hated. And when the clerk read the violations, even the people who came in for parking tickets lifted their heads. Share this with someone who needs to see how fast a courtroom can change, because before the morning was over, a judge known for wisdom, a furious victim, a frightened mother, and one stubborn teenager would collide in a way no one in that room would ever forget. Case number 19T44827, Providence Municipal Court, Thursday, November 14, 2019. The defendant, a minor appearing with his legal guardian, was cited for operating a motor vehicle without a license, failure to yield in a school zone, leaving the scene of property damage, and careless operation after a 7:42 a.m. collision at the corner of Broad Street and Dabal Street, 2 blocks from a public elementary school. If that sounds bad, it was worse in person. Because the first thing the gallery saw was Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, age 62, a crossing guard in a neon yellow jacket, sitting in the front row with a soft brace wrapped around her left wrist. Next to her sat Samir Hassan, a delivery driver with dark circles under his eyes and a blue Amazon Logistics polo under a winter coat. 2 seats down was Tasha Green, a daycare assistant from Elmwood, holding a repair estimate in one hand and the keys to her dented silver 2009 Honda CR-V in the other. 3 ordinary people. 3 disrupted mornings. 3 people who believed this kid had almost ruined far more than a traffic lane. The prosecutor, Ellen Pierce, didn't waste time. She stood, buttoned the front of her charcoal blazer, and laid it out in the clean, clipped tone that only made everything sound worse. At approximately 7:42 a.m., she said, the minor operated a dark green 2012 Toyota Camry eastbound through a posted school zone without a valid license. Surveillance footage and witness statements indicate the vehicle struck traffic cones, clipped the rear quarter panel of Ms. Green's parked Honda, swerved into the bike lane, and forced crossing guard Evelyn Brooks to jump back while assisting children across the street. The vehicle continued for half a block, contacted the rear step bumper of Mr. Hassan's Ford Transit delivery van, and then fled the scene. A soft wave of disgust moved through the gallery. Someone whispered, "Unbelievable." Someone else muttered, "15." And Mateo, standing beside his mother at the defense table, did the worst possible thing a scared kid can do in a room full of adults. He shrugged. It wasn't a big shrug, not a dramatic one, just enough to make it look like this was boring him. Mrs. Brooks inhaled sharply through her nose. Tasha Green folded her arms. Samir Hassan shook his head like he'd seen this before. And that was when the outrage started building. Because there is almost nothing people hate more than danger without remorse. A teenager driving in a school zone without a license is one thing. A teenager looking unimpressed while victims sit 10 feet away is something else entirely. You could feel the room hardening against him, the way people do when they think they're watching entitlement in human form. Judge Caprio looked down over his glasses. He had seen every kind of defendant, loud ones, Smooth ones, liars, crybabies, people who weaponized charm, people who weaponized poverty, people who thought youth itself should erase consequences. He didn't raise his voice. He almost never had to. The courtroom got quiet because his silence carried more weight than shouting. "Mateo," he said, calm and steady, "is there a reason you look like this is an inconvenience?" The boy's jaw tightened. "No, sir." Judge Caprio leaned back. "Then help me understand the shrug." Mateo stared at the tabletop for a second too long. "I don't know." That answer made things worse. The judge glanced at Mateo's mother, Rosa Alvarez, 41 years old, still in pale blue scrubs from a night shift at Roger Williams Medical Center, eyes red, hair tied back in a loose bun that had given up hours ago. She looked beyond exhausted. She looked embarrassed. "Ma'am," Judge Caprio said gently, "are you his mother?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Did you know your son was driving that car?" "No, sir." That landed hard. Rosa's voice cracked on the second sentence, and suddenly the hearing stopped feeling like a routine traffic case and started feeling like a family fracture being forced under bright light. "No, sir," she said again. "I was at work. I didn't know he took the keys." Mateo looked away from her, not at the victims, not at the judge, away. If you've ever watched someone try to hide shame with attitude, you know that look. It isn't confidence. It's panic wearing a cheap costume. But nobody in that room was ready to give him the benefit of the doubt yet. The prosecutor continued. There was body cam footage from Officer Daniel O'Rourke, who found the Camry parked crooked behind a three-family house on Gallatin Street 18 minutes after the collision. There was surveillance from DeLuca Pharmacy, showing the car entering the school zone at a speed estimated between 29 and 32 miles per hour in a posted 15 zone. There was damage photographed at the scene. Bent cones, white paint transfer, a cracked taillight, and one bent delivery van step. There was also something else. Mrs. Brooks's written incident statement. And when Ellen Pierce lifted the paper, the room leaned forward. "Ms. Brooks wrote," the prosecutor said, reading directly, "I had 2 children in front of me and 1 behind me. I heard the engine before I saw the car. The tires made that scraping sound when somebody turns too fast. I pulled one little boy back by his coat. If I had been 1 second slower, someone would have been hit." The words sat there. Heavy. Visible. 1 second slower. Like this video, if you believe a single second can separate a mistake from a tragedy, because that sentence changed the temperature of the room. Mateo swallowed, but he still didn't speak. The prosecutor then held up a second document, this one from Cranston Auto Body. Tasha Green's estimate was $1,846.22. Samir Hassan's van repair estimate was $612.13, and because the step bumper damage kept his side door from opening correctly, he had lost a full shift. "I get paid by route completion," Samir told the court. "No van, no route. No route, no pay." Judge Caprio nodded. "How much work did you lose?" "1 day this time, Your Honor, but that 1 day was my electric bill." That line hit the gallery differently. Not because it was dramatic, because it was ordinary. An electric bill. People understood that. A cracked bumper sounds like metal. An unpaid electric bill sounds like a family sitting in the dark. And still Mateo said nothing. The judge folded his hands. "Young man, look at the people in front of you." Mateo didn't move. "Look at them." Slowly, almost resentfully, he raised his eyes. Mrs. Brooks met his stare with cold anger. Tasha Green looked hurt more than furious, like she was tired of other people's recklessness landing on people with no room left for surprises. Samir looked disappointed in that deep, exhausted way that cuts worse than rage. Judge Caprio let the silence work. Then came the first twist. The defense hadn't said a word yet because Matteo's assigned attorney, Michael Renzi, had asked for permission to let the prosecutor finish first. That was unusual enough. But when Renzi finally stood up, he didn't begin with an excuse. He didn't start with the boy's grades or his age or his difficult home life. He said, "Your Honor, before I offer any explanation, I am requesting that the court view the pharmacy surveillance all the way through, not just the first impact." The prosecutor frowned. "The city has no objection. The footage has been marked." A monitor near the bench flickered on. What happened next was the first moment when everybody in that courtroom realized this was not going to be a simple punishment story. The footage was grainy, timestamped 0742, 11 in the corner, the sky still gray-blue with that miserable Rhode Island winter light that makes everything look colder than it is. The green Camry entered frame too fast, yes, too fast for a school zone. No question. It clipped a cone. The rear of Tasha's parked Honda jerked. Mrs. Brooks stepped back and grabbed a child by the hood of his coat. The gallery murmured. Then the video continued. And 6 frames later, from the left side of the screen, a little boy in a bright orange puffer jacket darted off the curb chasing a red rubber ball. The car jerked hard to the right. Not toward him. Away from him. The tires screamed, the van got clipped, the Camry bounced and kept going. The room went dead quiet. The prosecutor's expression changed first, not to sympathy, just to caution. Because now the story had a new shape. Matteo had still been driving illegal. Why he had still endangered people, he had still left the scene. But the footage showed something nobody expected. At the worst possible second, he had chosen not to hit a child. And suddenly, all the easy outrage got complicated. Drop a comment telling us what you would have thought in that exact moment. Because the gallery that wanted punishment 30 seconds earlier was now staring at the screen like it had betrayed them. Judge Caprio didn't rush. He never did. "Mr. Renzi," he said, "continue." The defense attorney adjusted his tie. He was in his late 50s, hair silver at the temples, one of those lawyers who understood that if you oversell mercy, you lose credibility. "Your Honor, Matteo was wrong to take the vehicle, wrong to drive, wrong to leave. We are not contesting that, but the footage matters because intent matters. He did not drive toward those children. He reacted to avoid one." The prosecutor stepped in before sympathy could become momentum. "Intent does not erase danger." "Of course not," Renzi replied, "but context matters." Judge Caprio looked at Matteo. "Does context include telling the truth?" A tiny pause. "Yes, sir." "Then you'd better start soon." Matteo opened his mouth, then closed it. Rosa Alvarez exhaled shakily and put one hand over her face. And right there, 10 minutes into the hearing, everybody watching knew 2 things at once. First, this kid had made a reckless choice that could have changed lives forever. Second, the full truth had not come out yet. The prosecutor called Mrs. Brooks. She walked slowly to the front, favoring her right hip, the yellow crossing guard jacket folded over one arm. She was the kind of woman children trust on instinct. Short silver hair, square glasses, practical shoes, the steady posture of someone who had spent years getting other people safely where they needed to go. But there was no softness in her eyes that morning. "Mrs. Brooks," Ellen Pierce said, "what do you want the court to understand?" Mrs. Brooks did not look at the prosecutor. She looked straight at Matteo. "I want him to understand," she said, "that little things are not little when children are involved." Her voice was measured, controlled, which somehow made it more powerful. "I've worked that corner for 11 years. I know every bus driver. I know which children need their laces tied. I know who forgets gloves and who's scared of dogs. That morning I had Marcus Donnelly holding my left hand and his sister Ava 2 steps behind me. I heard the tires and thought, this is it. This is the morning I fail." The courtroom didn't move. Mrs. Brooks continued. He may have swerved to avoid one child. I'll give him that. I saw it. But he should never have been behind that wheel. The reason I have this brace on my wrist is because I yanked Marcus back so hard we both fell sideways. I can still hear Ava screaming. Mateo's face changed at the name. Marcus. Ava. Not children, not pedestrians. Names. That matters in court. Names turn abstraction into guilt. I don't hate him, Mrs. Brooks said, but I want him to feel this. I want him to remember what fear sounds like when it comes out of a 7-year-old. There was a sound in the back row then, not loud, just a little gasp followed by that rustling silence people make when they're trying not to react too visibly. It was the kind of statement that clips go viral for, the kind of sentence people quote in comment sections under courtroom videos. Everybody in the room knew it. Judge Caprio nodded with respect. Thank you, Mrs. Brooks. Then Samir Hassan stepped up. Samir was 34, a father of 2, originally from Dearborn, now living in Pawtucket. He had a wedding band worn thin at the bottom, and the posture of a man who had spent too many mornings loading more weight than his back wanted. He held his phone in one hand, and on it was a photo of his van's bent rear step. You know what people think when they hear van damage? He asked, half to the room, half to himself. They think inconvenience, they think paperwork, but I load 40 to 60 packages a morning. That step is how I get up and down all day. It bends, I lose time. Lose time, I miss windows. Miss windows, I get penalized. People with money call it a minor accident. People like me call it Thursday not getting paid. He finally looked at Mateo. You know what bothered me most, kid? Not that you hit the van, not even that you ran. It's that I stood there looking down the street thinking, whoever was driving that car better at least care. Mateo's shoulders dropped an inch. That was the first physical sign the room had seen. And still he said nothing. Tasha Green went next. 29, single mother, daycare worker at Little Sprouts Learning Center on Elmwood Avenue. She wore a beige cardigan, a plain white blouse, and the expression of someone holding herself together because she did not have time to fall apart. My daughter Nia has asthma, she told the judge. I need thaw. Car. I use it to get to work, pick her up, get her nebulizer refill, everything. When I saw the dent, I knew exactly what it meant. Missed hours, repair money, calls to my sister asking for rides. People always say, at least nobody died. And sure, thank God, but some of us don't have room in the budget for somebody else's bad decision. That line was so honest it hurt. No theatrics, no courtroom language, just life. And then came the thing that made Mateo finally look human. Tasha pulled a crumpled piece of notebook paper from her purse. It was under my windshield wiper when I got off work that day. The prosecutor blinked. What is it? A note. The judge lifted his head. A note from whom? Tasha unfolded it carefully. Her voice softened as she read. I'm sorry about your car. I know sorry doesn't fix it. I got scared and left. That was wrong. I don't have money, but I can work. If you want to yell at me, you can. If you want me to help, I will. My name is Mateo. I'm on Gallatin. I know I was a coward. The room froze. Even Mateo looked stunned that it had surfaced. His lawyer closed his eyes briefly, like he knew the note existed but hadn't expected this timing. Ellen Pierce held out her hand. May I see that? Tasha passed it over. Judge Caprio asked the obvious question. Why wasn't this disclosed earlier? Tasha answered honestly. Because I didn't know if it was him and I was mad. I thought maybe it was some joke. Then Detective Hall called 2 days later and gave me the vehicle information and the first name matched. I kept it. Judge Caprio took the paper and read it for himself. The entire room changed again. Because now the boy who shrugged, the boy who looked careless, the boy who seemed untouched by what he'd done, had apparently returned to the scene after running and left a handwritten apology for at least one victim. But why wouldn't he say that earlier? Why stand there acting cold when there was proof he cared? Why let the room hate him? That question sat over everything now. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever seen someone act hard when they were actually scared, because the next few minutes exposed a truth deeper than any traffic violation. Judge Caprio placed the note on the bench with surprising gentleness. "Mateo," he said, "did you write this?" "Yes, sir." "Why didn't you tell me?" The boy's answer came out flat, "Because it doesn't matter." That sentence was so revealing it almost didn't sound like dialogue. It sounded like damage. Judge Caprio tilted his head. "It matters to me." Mateo stared at his own hands. "People only care about what you did." The judge didn't flinch. "Sometimes that's true. Today I'm asking who you are." For the first time, Mateo looked directly at him. And if you had blinked, you might have missed it, but there it was. The first crack in the mask. Not tears. Not yet. Just that sharp, startled look of a kid who did not expect an adult to ask a question he didn't know how to answer. Defense attorney Renzi took a slow breath. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to provide background." "Go ahead." Mateo had been born in Providence and raised mostly on the South Side. His father, Luis Alvarez, had been in and out of the household for years before disappearing completely after a nonviolent felony conviction in 2016. Rosa worked nights as a nursing assistant and twice a week cleaned office suites downtown after her hospital shift. Mateo watched his 10-year-old sister, Sophia, most mornings and most evenings. He had no juvenile record, no prior traffic issues, no known gang involvement. He was a sophomore at Central High with spotty attendance, strong math scores, 2 detentions for defiance, and one teacher note calling him, quote, "bright but guarded." Guarded. That word hung there. His lawyer continued. There was also a letter from school counselor Deirdre Coleman, submitted that morning, stating that Mateo had been helping care for his maternal grandfather, Hector Ruiz, who had recently started dialysis after complications from diabetes. The family's car had broken down in September. Rosa's brother had loaned them the green Camry for 2 weeks while his own truck was in the shop. The prosecutor cut in. "Background does not authorize a 15-year-old to take a vehicle." "No one is suggesting it does," Renzi said. Then he reached into his file and pulled out something else. "A second note, Your Honor. This one written by Mateo but not delivered." Judge Caprio took it. The paper was folded neatly, edges worn from being opened and closed. The judge read silently, then set it down slower than before. "Would you like me to read this?" he asked the boy. Mateo's jaw clenched. "No, sir." "Why not?" "Because it sounds stupid." Judge Caprio gave one of those tiny Caprio half-smiles that meant trouble and compassion were arriving together. "Son, most truth sounds stupid to people who aren't used to saying it." The gallery shifted. That Lynn E would have made headlines by itself. Mateo's lawyer spoke softly. "It was found in his backpack by his mother the night before court." Rosa Alvarez nodded, already crying. Judge Caprio looked at the letter one more time, then addressed the room. "I'm not going to read all of it, but I will read one sentence because I think it matters." He lifted the page. "I know everybody thinks the worst thing I did was run, but the worst thing I did was make people afraid when they were just trying to get through a normal morning." No one moved. No one coughed. No one checked a phone. Because all at once, the boy who had seemed smug now sounded painfully aware. And that only deepened the mystery. If he understood that much, why had he taken the car in the first place? Why risk children? Why hide behind indifference? Judge Caprio looked up. "Mateo, we're getting closer, not all the way, closer. Why were you in that car at 7:42 in the morning?" The boy's fingers curled against the edge of the table. His mother whispered, "Me." But he didn't answer. The prosecutor requested the body cam. Officer Daniel O'Rourke entered, uniform pressed, winter gloves clipped to his belt, carrying the dry professionalism of someone who had testified 100 times. His body cam footage showed him approaching the Camry at 8:00 a.m. behind the Gallatin Street house. The hood was warm. The boy's hands were shaking when he came out from the side entrance. On camera, Mateo initially denied driving. Then he saw the paint transfer on the bumper, looked at the ground, and said, "I know." Not "I didn't do it." Not "it wasn't me." "I know." Officer O'Rourke testified that the boy then repeatedly asked whether anyone had been hit, not whether he would be arrested, not whether the car was totaled, whether anyone had been hit. "That struck me," the officer said. The prosecutor crossed him. And did the defendant also try to avoid responsibility? Yes. Did he lie? At first, yes. Did he admit he drove without a license? Yes. So despite concern after the fact, his choices before and during the incident put the public at risk. Yes, ma'am. There it was again, both things true at once. Wrong and worried. Reckless and afraid. That's what made the case start feeling bigger than a traffic hearing. It was no longer about choosing between monster and victim. It was about deciding what to do with a child who had done real harm without being a simple villain. And then came revelation number 2. The prosecutor said, "Your Honor, the city also has a supplemental report from Officer O'Rourke." At 8:17 a.m., after being advised of the violations, the defendant made a spontaneous statement. Judge Caprio raised an eyebrow, which was. Ellen Pierce read from the report. "I thought if I could get her there fast, nobody would know." The judge turned to Mateo immediately. "Get who there?" The room tightened. Rosa Alvarez's hand flew to her mouth. The boy closed his eyes. And suddenly, everyone understood that another person had been in that car. Someone the court had not heard about. Someone vulnerable enough that the entire hearing shifted on its axis. "Mateo," Judge Caprio said, quieter now, "who was in the car?" "My sister." Rosa made a sound no mother wants to make in public, half sob, half disbelief. Judge Caprio's voice sharpened. "How old?" 10. The gallery exploded into whispers. 10. Oh my God. She was in the car. This was but wait, there's more twist that turned a dangerous traffic case into something almost unbearable. Because now the court wasn't only dealing with strangers in the roadway. There had been a child inside the illegal car being driven by another child. The prosecutor looked stunned, then immediately concerned. Was she injured? No, Officer O'Rourke said. She had already gone inside the residence by the time I arrived. The mother later confirmed she was safe. Judge Caprio turned to Rosa. You knew this? No, she whispered. No, I didn't know any of this. The judge looked back at Mateo. So now you're going to tell me everything. And for a second, it looked like the boy might shut down again. Then he saw his mother crying. Not angry crying. Broken crying. And that was the first real collapse. His shoulders gave out, not dramatically, just all at once, like whatever had been holding him upright was suddenly too tired to keep lying. We missed the bus, he said. His voice was rough and low. My mom was at work. My grandfather had dialysis at Rhode Island Hospital. My uncle was supposed to pick him up at 7:15, but he never came. My sister Sophia had a spelling test she was freaking out about because if she missed another one she'd get dropped from the reading group. My grandfather started yelling because he said if he missed check-in again they'd move his chair time. My phone was dead. I didn't know what to do. He paused. The whole courtroom leaned in. So you took the car, Judge Caprio said. Mateo nodded once. I only meant to take Sophia to school and come back. That was it. The prosecutor asked the question everyone was thinking. Why not call 911? Why not ask a neighbor? Why not stay home? Mateo laughed once, not because anything was funny, because some kids laugh when they're cornered by how impossible their own decisions sound. Because I thought I could handle it. And there it was, the real antagonist of the story. Not evil. Not rebellion. Pride. Immature, terrified, adolescent pride. The kind that would rather make a catastrophic decision than admit it needs help. Like this video, if you've ever learned the hard way that pride can wreck lives faster than anger ever could. The judge asked, "Did Sophia know how old you are?" "Yes." "Did she tell you not to drive?" Mateo hesitated. "She told me to slow down." That detail hit the room like a slap. A 10-year-old telling the driver to slow down. A child recognizing danger while the older brother ignored it. Mrs. Brooks closed her eyes. Samir looked down at the floor. Even Ellen Pierce lost some of the steel in her expression. Judge Caprio sat back and let silence do its work again. Then he asked the question that broke the hearing wide open. "Mateo, when you left the scene, what were you thinking?" The answer came instantly this time. That everybody would be better if I just disappeared. Not because he wanted to die. Because he wanted to vanish from the damage. The courtroom understood that too. This was not the language of a fearless kid. It was the language of a boy who had spent too long believing his mistakes made him more burden than son. Judge Caprio asked for a brief recess. People in the gallery stood and whispered in tight little circles. The clerk collected papers. Rosa sat with both hands pressed over her eyes. Mateo stood alone near the defense table, arms folded tight over his chest like he was physically holding himself in. Mrs. Brooks surprised everyone by walking over first. Not to forgive him. Not yet. Just to stand nearby. Up close, he looked younger. That's something adults forget until they're 3 feet away from a teenager and see the acne on the jawline, the bitten nails, the half-healed scrape on the knuckles, the way bravado never fully hides baby fat from a scared face. "You scared me," she told him quietly. He nodded. "You scared those children." He nodded again. "You scared yourself too, didn't you?" This time he looked up. And for the first time all morning, no performance came out. "Yes, ma'am." She held his gaze for another second, then walked back to her seat without another word. That tiny exchange would have been enough for most viral courtroom clips, but the biggest moment was still coming. When the hearing resumed, defense attorney Renzi called Deirdre Coleman, Mateo's school counselor. She wasn't on the original witness list, but the judge allowed brief testimony because it related to disposition. Coleman was in her 30s, sharp navy coat, yellow legal pad, the kind of school counselor who learns to hear pain beneath sarcasm for a living. She testified that Mateo had been late or absent 12 mornings that semester, often because he was managing responsibilities beyond his age. He never asked for pity. He rarely asked for anything. In meetings, he spoke more about his mother being tired and his grandfather needing rides than about himself. "Did he present as disrespectful?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes," Coleman said to everyone's surprise. The room shifted. But I learned quickly that his disrespect was mostly self-protection. He would rather adults think he doesn't care than see that he's overwhelmed. That sentence landed with the precision of a diagnosis. She also described something else. 3 weeks before court, after the incident but before the hearing date, Mateo had asked if the school had any extra lunch vouchers because, quote, "My mom's doing double shifts and my sister keeps giving me half of hers." Again, ordinary details. Lunch, bus schedules, dialysis check-in. These were not dramatic facts. They were the machinery of a family barely staying upright. The prosecutor tried to restore balance. "Ms. Coleman, Does hardship excuse unlawful conduct? No, she said immediately, but it explains why a child might mistake desperation for responsibility. That was a line people would repeat long after the case ended. Judge Caprio then did something subtle and powerful. He asked Sophia to come forward. She had been sitting in the back the entire time with Rose's cousin Maribel, small and still in a Navy school uniform sweater, braids tied with white ribbons. 10 years old, big brown eyes, the center of a morning she never asked for. Only if you're comfortable, the judge said. She nodded. Did your brother take you to school that morning? Yes. Did he tell you what he was doing? He said Mommy was stuck at work and he'd fix it. The judge paused. Were you scared? Sophia looked at Mateo before answering. First no, then yes. Why yes? Because he kept saying it's fine too many times. The gallery exhaled all at once. Kids know, they always know. When grown-ups repeat it's fine, Judge Caprio said softly, sometimes that means it is very much not fine. Sophia nodded. Then the judge asked a question no one expected. Do you love your brother? She looked confused by how easy that was. Yes. Do you think he loves you? That one made Mateo flinch before she even answered. Yes. How do you know? Because he acts mad when he's scared. And with one sentence from a 10-year-old child, the whole armor of the hearing cracked open. Acts mad when he's scared. Not just Mateo. Half the adults in that room probably recognized themselves. There's a reason moments like that spread across the internet. Because truth gets powerful when it comes from somebody too young to polish it. Judge Caprio thanked her and sent her back to her seat. Then he turned to the defendant again. Mateo, before I decide anything, I want to give you a chance to speak. Not through your lawyer, not through letters, you. And I want one thing from you that matters more than polished words. What? The whole truth. The boy took a long breath. It felt like the entire courtroom took it with him. I wasn't trying to be some hero, he said. I know that now. I keep hearing people say I was taking care of things. I was. I wanted to act like I was the man of the house, like I could handle whatever came up. Like if my mom was tired and my uncle didn't show and my grandpa was yelling and Sophia was crying, I could just fix it by doing something fast. He stopped and swallowed. But fixing it fast is what made everything worse. There it was. The moment of realization. Pure, clear, no lawyer language. Judge Caprio asked, why the shrug when you first came in? Mateo answered without hesitation this time. Because if I looked nervous, everybody would know I was a kid. The judge leaned forward. You are a kid. A few people in the gallery nodded before they even realized they were doing it. Mateo stared at the bench. I know. No, Judge Caprio said, voice firm but not cruel. I don't think you do, because children make one of two dangerous mistakes when life gets heavy. They either believe someone else will clean up every mess or they believe they have to carry everything alone. You chose the second one. It may sound more noble. It is still dangerous. That line hit with the force of a verdict. Share this with someone raising a teenager, because what the judge said next sounded less like a sentence and more like a life lesson no school teaches enough. Responsibility is not pretending you can do adult things before you're ready, Judge Caprio said. Responsibility is knowing the difference between helping and controlling. The room went absolutely silent. Mateo's lips trembled for the first time. Just barely. Then the prosecutor made one final move. Your Honor, Ellen Pierce said, the city respects the complexities here, but we cannot overlook the fact that multiple people were endangered, 2 vehicles were damaged, and a child was transported by an unlicensed minor. Mercy cannot become a signal that the conduct itself was understandable. Judge Caprio nodded, agreed. Defense attorney Renzi stood. And accountability must not become a blindfold that prevents the court from recognizing genuine remorse. Also agreed, the judge said. That was the whole hearing in one exchange, two truths, neither canceling the other. Then came the emotional peak everyone would remember. Judge Caprio picked up the folded, undelivered letter again. "Matteo," he said, "I'm not interested in speeches meant to save money. I'm not interested in tears used as tools. I've been doing this too long. But I am interested in courage. Not the fake courage of taking keys and pretending that was maturity. Real courage. The kind that looks somebody you hurt in the eye and says the thing pride doesn't want to say." Matteo nodded slowly. The judge looked toward Mrs. Brooks, Samir, and Tasha. "Say it to them." No one breathed. This was the confrontation around which the whole story had been building. Not a yelling match, something harder. A child standing before the people whose ordinary lives he had violently interrupted and being told to stop hiding. Matteo turned first to Tasha Green. His voice nearly failed on the first word, but he pushed through it. "Ms. Green, I'm sorry I hit your car, but I'm more sorry that I made your day harder when you were already trying to take care of your daughter. I didn't think about that when I drove. I thought about me. I thought if I could make my own problem go away, then nobody else would count. Your car wasn't just a car. It was how you get your kid where she needs to go. I knew that when I left the note. I was just too ashamed to say it out loud." Tasha had one hand over her mouth before he even finished. He turned to Samir. "Mr. Haas, and I'm sorry I messed with your work. I heard what you said about your electric bill. I don't know why that hit me so hard except maybe because I hear my mom talking about bills all the time. I knew somebody would pay for what I did. I just hoped it wouldn't have to be me. That was coward stuff." Samir blinked twice and looked away. Then Matteo turned to Mrs. Brooks. And that was the hardest one. Because she represented the thing he could not rewrite, the image that would never leave him, children in a crosswalk, tires screaming. His voice broke openly this time. "Mrs. Brooks, I am sorry I made you afraid. I am sorry I made those kids afraid. I know you said you can still hear one of them screaming. I can too. I hear it when I'm trying to sleep. I hear the brakes and I hear my sister saying slow down and I hear that little kid with the ball and I keep thinking if I moved 1 second different." He stopped and covered his face. Then he forced his hands down again. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I was trying to act older than I am, and I acted smaller than I should have." That line hit like thunder. Trying to act older than I am, and I acted smaller than I should have. You could feel the room absorb it. This was the moment millions would replay. This was the line clipped for short videos, quoted in headlines, passed around group chats with captions like, "This kid learned more in one day than some adults learn in a lifetime." But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. "Is there anyone else you need to apologize to?" he asked. Matteo turned. His mother was already crying too hard to hide it. He faced her fully. "Mom, I'm sorry I made your life heavier. I keep trying to help without asking you what help even is. I know you trust me with Sophia, and I used that trust to make a decision you never would have said yes to. I made you walk in here in your scrubs after working all night and hear people talk about me like I'm dangerous. I hate that I did that to you." Rosa Alvarez nodded through tears. Then he looked at his little sister. "Sophia, I'm sorry I told you it was fine when it was. You were right. I should have slowed down, I should have stopped, I should have asked for help." Sophia started crying openly. And then came the 6 words that the title of this video hangs on. Matteo turned back to the bench, stood straight and said, "Judge Caprio, I'm sorry for pretending. Not for driving. Not for getting caught. For pretending. Pretending to be grown, pretending not to care, pretending fear was strength, pretending consequences only belong to other people." Judge Caprio's expression changed. He was still the judge, still careful, still responsible for justice, but everyone in that room could see it. He had heard something real. That, the judge said quietly, is the first fully adult thing you've done all morning. The gallery broke into whispers, then silence again. Mateo wiped his face with his sleeve and kept going, because once the truth starts coming, it often comes all at once. I also need to say something else. When I left that note on Ms. Green's car, I wrote one for Mrs. Brooks too, but I threw it away. I thought she wouldn't care. I thought nobody would care unless I had money. And I don't. But if the court lets me, I'll work. I'll clean, lift, shovel, carry, do whatever. Not because I want out, because I owe. That word mattered. Owe. Not deserve a break. Not please go easy. I owe. Judge Caprio placed both hands on the bench. Young man, remember this quote for the rest of your life. A mistake tells me what you did. An apology tells me who you're becoming. That was shareable quote number 2, and everyone knew at the second he said it. Then he added another one. Mercy without responsibility is weakness. Responsibility without mercy is cruelty. A good court must know the difference. Quote number 3. There was nothing flashy about the way he said it. That's what made it powerful. The judge then invited the victims to respond if they wished. Nobody expected what happened next. Mrs. Brooks asked to speak first. She stood slowly, brace visible, eyes glossy now instead of hard. Young man, she said, I'm still angry. I want you to know that. Anger doesn't vanish because tears show up, but I believe you now. The room held still. You scared children, and for that I need you to carry a memory you won't enjoy carrying. But I also heard something today I don't hear enough from adults, let alone 15-year-olds. You didn't apologize around the truth. You apologized through it. Then she reached into her tote bag and pulled out a folded index card. This is my phone number and the after-school crossing volunteer coordinator's number at Broad Street Elementary. You are not driving anyone anywhere. Let us be clear. But if the judge orders community service, I would like some of it served where you can spend a few afternoons protecting the same kind of children you endangered. A visible shiver moved Thraug. The gallery. That was the forgiveness twist. Not erasing harm. Redirecting it. Justice transforming into responsibility. Mateo stared at the card like it weighed 10 pounds. Samir Hassan spoke next. I want restitution, he said plainly. Not because I'm cruel, because money lost is money lost. But I'll say this. If the court approves a payment plan, I'll take $10 a week if that's what he can do. Slow money is still honest money. Tasha Green wiped tears from her cheek and added, I want him to understand how small mistakes become big problems for people living close to the edge. But I also think he does understand that now. If he writes a real apology, not because a judge told him to, but because he means it, I'll accept that with the payments. 3 victims, 3 layers of harm, 3 doors left open. This was no longer schadenfreude, no longer look at this kid get what's coming. The whole room had crossed into empathy, and not the cheap kind, the costly kind, the kind that still asks for accountability. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button, because the next twist is what made this hearing unforgettable even by Judge Caprio standards. The judge looked down at a final document in the file. Officer O'Rourke, is it correct that after this incident, the defendant asked whether there was a way to pay the city back by working? Yes, Your Honor. And did he, on his own, report to Manny's Tire and Service on Reservoir Avenue asking for extra hours? Rosa turned in surprise. Mateo. The boy looked stunned that the court knew. The officer confirmed it. Yes, we spoke to the owner when verifying statements. Mr. Manuel Ferreira reported that the defendant asked for anything legal and dirty because he needed money to pay people back. That line drew a few broken laughs through tears, the kind of laugh that releases pressure. Judge Caprio smiled faintly. Anything legal and dirty, I appreciate the clarity. Mateo looked like he wanted the floor to open. Then Manuel Ferreira himself stood up from the back row. Nobody had noticed him before. Thick forearms, flannel shirt, weathered face, grease still under the nails even in court. He raised a hand awkwardly. "Your Honor, if I may." Judge Caprio allowed it. Manny stepped forward. "Kid came into my shop 2 days after the crash. I know his grandfather. He asked if I needed floors swept, tires stacked, trash hauled, whatever. I asked him why. He said, because sorry is broke unless it sweats." The room made that little collective sound people make when a sentence punches straight through them. Sorry is broke unless it sweats. Quote number 4. Manny continued. "I gave him Saturdays. He's been there 3 Saturdays already. Didn't say much, just worked." Rosa looked at her son like she was seeing a room in her own house she hadn't realized existed. Judge Caprio turned back to Mateo. "Why didn't you tell your mother?" "I didn't want her thinking she had to fix this too." Another hard truth. The judge nodded slowly. "Your problem, son, is not that you don't care. It's that you keep confusing secrecy with strength." Quote number 5. You could have framed that one. The prosecutor, to her credit, did not resist the momentum with ego. She simply said, "The city would ask that any sentence include no driving until lawfully licensed, mandatory school attendance review, restitution, and supervised community service." "Reasonable," the judge said. Then he addressed Mateo directly. "Stand up straight." The boy did. "I am not going to crush you today, but do not mistake that for softness. What you did could have ended a child's life. It could have destroyed your family. It could have made your mother answer a phone call no parent should ever receive. You do understand that now, yes?" "Yes, sir." "Say it in full." Mateo took a breath. "I could have killed somebody." The words landed like a bell. "Again," said the judge. "I could have killed somebody." "One more time, and this time include yourself in the somebody." Mateo's face drained. "I could have killed somebody, maybe me too." That was the breakthrough. Not fear of punishment, understanding of consequence. Judge Caprio nodded. "Good, never forget that sentence. It may save your life one day." Then came the ruling. On the charge of operating without a license, the statutory fine is imposed and suspended conditioned on compliance. On failure to yield in a school zone and careless operation, fines are reduced but not erased, with payment structured through supervised restitution at $10 per week minimum until obligations to the victims are met. On leaving the scene of property damage, the court imposes community service, 100 hours, of which at least 40 shall be completed in approved school crossing or child safety support functions under adult supervision. The defendant is prohibited from operating any motor vehicle until legally licensed, and then only after completion of a certified driver education course. This court also orders attendance verification from Central High every 30 days for 6 months, and a written reflection letter to each named victim, handwritten, no templates, no lawyer edits. The courtroom listened like this was gospel. Then he added the part nobody expected. If the defendant completes every condition, stays violation-free, and receives positive reports from the school and service supervisors, this court will convert the remaining financial penalties to educational credit support for drivers' education and vocational training. Mateo blinked. "You do that?" Judge Caprio answered with one of the most powerful lines of the day. "I'm not investing in the mistake. I'm investing in the man you might become if you stop pretending to be one before you're ready." People actually gasped at that. Not because it was flashy, because it was precise. The judge then looked at Rosa Alvarez. Ma'am, your son needs boundaries and help, not just one or the other. Do not hand him adult burdens because he can carry groceries and keep a brave face. Rosa nodded, tears still falling. Yes, Your Honor. And Mateo. Yes, sir. Your mother's exhaustion is not permission to become reckless. Ask for help before you decide help means taking control. Yes, sir. Then Judge Caprio surprised everybody again. He looked at Sophia. And young lady, if your brother ever says it's fine too many times again, I want you to tell your mother immediately. The room laughed softly through tears. Sophia nodded solemnly. Court could have ended there. For most people, that would have been enough. Tears, mercy, a wise ruling, a viral apology. But this story became unforgettable because of what happened after the gavel should have closed it. As the clerk began organizing the next case, Mateo did something no one told him to do. He stepped away from the defense table, walked first to Mrs. Brooks, and asked, "May I shake your hand, or does your wrist hurt?" The courtroom went still again. She looked at him for a long second. Then she switched hands and took his. "Next time," she said, "use your feet for walking, not panic." "Yes, ma'am." He turned to Samir and asked for the amount of the first payment. Samir, almost smiling now, said, 10 on Friday. Cash is fine. Mateo nodded like it was an oath. Then he faced Tasha Green. "Can I still write the letter?" "You better write the letter," she said, voice trembling. That got a few real laughs. People in the gallery were wiping their eyes, and they knew it was one of those mornings they'd tell other people about later. Not because justice was perfect. It never is. But because they had watched accountability and compassion stop being opposites. And then came the unexpected twist around what would be the final third of the story. 2 months later, on January 23, 2020, a follow-up compliance review was held. Same courthouse, different atmosphere, same judge, same case file. The weather outside was brutal, sleet tapping against the windows, but inside there was a quiet sense of anticipation because word had spread. Court officers were already whispering, "This is the kid from November." A couple of law students from Brown sat in the gallery because one of them had heard about the hearing from a clerk's cousin. Even people waiting on meter tickets were asking who Mateo Alvarez was. He came in wearing a plain gray Champion sweatshirt, black work pants, and boots with salt stains on the toes. No slouch, no fake swagger, no backpack this time, just a manila folder and a cheap spiral notebook. Rosa was with him again, but now she looked less like someone bracing for impact and more like someone afraid to hope too much. Judge Caprio looked over the updated reports. From Central High, improved attendance, no disciplinary incidents, grades up from 2 DS and a C- to 2 BS, 2 CS, and an A in geometry. From Manny's Tire and Service, punctual, hardworking, minimal talking, excellent cleanup, learning basic tire rotation under supervision. From Broad Street Elementary Crossing Support, completed 22 hours, reliable, respectful, very good with children. Quote from Mrs. Brooks, "He notices the little ones before they step off the curb." That last line nearly undid the room. But there was one more document. A letter from Mateo to Judge Caprio, submitted not because it was required, but because he wanted it in the file. The judge asked if he could read part of it aloud. Mateo nodded. "I used to think mature people were the ones who handled everything alone. Now, I think mature people are the ones who tell the truth before the damage spreads. I don't want to be the kind of man who looks calm while other people pay for my panic." Silence. Then the judge looked up. "Who wrote that for you?" Mateo actually smiled, small, embarrassed, real. "Me, sir." "Good, keep writing." That alone would have been enough for a satisfying update. But then the court clerk handed the judge another envelope. No one knew what it was. Judge Caprio opened it, scanned the page, and the corner of his mouth shifted. "Well," he said, This is unusual. Everybody leaned in. It appears the city received a note from one of the children present at the original incident. The room tightened instantly. Ava Donnelly, age 7. The same little girl Mrs. Brooks had mentioned. Judge Caprio read it. Dear Judge, the boy who almost hit us now helps hold the stop sign after school, and he told my brother to tie his shoe 2 times because untied shoes are dangerous. I think he is serious now. From Ava. That was it. 7-year-old handwriting, child logic, total emotional destruction. People laughed and cried at once. Even Ellen Pierce had to look down. It was the most powerful kind of validation, because it came from the one place nobody can fake moral clarity. A child who had every reason to stay scared and had instead decided she felt safe again. Like this video, if you believe redemption means nothing unless the people you harmed can actually feel the change. Judge Caprio, visibly moved, looked back at Mateo. You understand what's happening here, don't you? I think so. No, let me say it clearly. A courtroom can punish behavior. It cannot manufacture character. That part is up to you. And by all accounts, you have begun doing the harder work when the cameras would normally be gone. That line mattered because it separated performance from transformation. Anybody can cry in court. Not everybody shows up on freezing afternoons to keep second graders out of traffic. The judge reduced none of the seriousness. He reminded Mateo again that unlawful driving could never happen again. He reminded Rosa that parentification can look like helpfulness until it becomes risk. He reminded the gallery that mercy is not softness when it is paired with structure. Then he asked one final question. Mateo, if you could speak to the version of yourself from that morning at 7:41 a.m., keys in hand, what would you say? The teenager looked down, then up. I'd say, being needed is not the same as being ready. That was quote number 6, and maybe the best one of all. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. Excellent, and what else? Mateo took a breath. I'd say, call somebody, any adult. Pride is cheaper than a funeral until it is. A sound moved through the courtroom like wind. Nobody expected that from a 15-year-old. Nobody forgot it after hearing it. The judge ordered the remainder of the sentence to continue as structured, praised the progress, and instructed the clerk to schedule a final review in late spring. When the session ended, one of the law students in the back whispered, "This is why people watch him." The other answered, "No, this is why people need him." That is what viral moments often hide. The deepest part is rarely the tears, it's the clarity. By April 30, 2020, the final review came. The city's records showed restitution paid in full to Tasha Green and Samir Hassan. Mrs. Brooks declined any personal payment, asking that Mateo instead donate $20 worth of crossing ponchos to the school for rainy days. Manny Ferreira reported that Mateo had become good enough around the shop to earn real hourly work. Central High reported continued attendance and a recommendation for summer vocational programming. Sophia's teacher sent a note saying Mateo had attended her reading celebration and cried harder than she did. Judge Caprio held all of it in his hands like a stack of evidence, proving a point bigger than the law. This time, the courtroom wasn't packed by accident. Word had gotten around the city. A local producer had even asked if a clip from the original hearing could be used in a community justice segment. People wanted updates because this case had become one of those rare stories where viewers don't just want punishment or pity. They want proof. Proof that a lesson lasted. Proof that tears became action. Proof that mercy wasn't wasted. And that morning they got it. Mateo stood taller now, not because he was trying to look grown, because he had stopped performing. That's an important difference. Judge Caprio reviewed the file, then looked at him over his glasses one last time. Mr. Alvarez, he said, using the more formal address deliberately, the court finds that you have complied with every condition imposed. Full restitution has been made. Community service has been completed above requirement. School performance has improved. There have been no further incidents. Accordingly, the suspended portions shall remain suspended and the court commends the effort. Then he paused. You did not become perfect. You became honest. That is where growth begins. Mateo nodded, eyes wet already. The judge wasn't done. I want you to remember another sentence for the rest of your life. Real men don't run from damage. They return with both hands open. Quote number 7. The gallery murmured it. S approval. Now tell me, Judge Caprio said, what are you going to do when life corners you next time? Mateo answered immediately. Ask for help before I make a problem bigger. And what are you going to do when shame tells you to act like you don't care? I'm going to tell the truth faster. That one got an audible from somewhere in the back row, the involuntary sound people make when truth arrives clean. Then Rosa was invited to speak. She stepped forward in a cream sweater, no scrubs this time, hair done, face still carrying the memory of the worst morning of her parenting life and the relief of not losing her son to it. She thanked the victims by name. She thanked the court. She thanked Mrs. Brooks for correcting him without crushing him. Then she said something that turned the ending from satisfying to unforgettable. My son thought being a man meant hiding fear and carrying weight in secret. Now he knows being a man means telling the truth before somebody gets hurt. There it was again, the theme spoken back by the mother who had suffered through it. Mrs. Brooks stood next and presented the court with a photo from a rainy afternoon crossing shift. In it, tiny children in bright coats were lined up at the curb, and beside her, holding extra ponchos in a plastic bag, was Mateo Alvarez, one hand raised to stop a turning car. That, she said, is what accountability can look like when it's taken seriously. Even the court officers smiled. Samir Hassan, appearing by phone because he was en route, confirmed all restitution had been received and added, "Tell the kid I expect him to buy a real pair of work gloves next paycheck." Tasha Green sent a written statement saying the apology letter was still taped inside her kitchen cabinet because it reminded me that some people are still teachable. Teachable. That word closed the circle. Not innocent. Not evil. Teachable. And maybe that is what made this case hit so hard with people who heard about it afterward. Because the world is full of stories where somebody makes a mistake and doubles down, blames everybody else, gets louder, meaner, more entitled. This was the opposite. A child stepped into court trying to act made of concrete and walked out willing to be corrected in public. That shocks people now. Humility shocks people now. A 15-year-old saying, "I was trying to act older than I am, and I acted smaller than I should have," shocks people now. A judge refusing to confuse mercy with weakness shocks people now. Victims leaving room for growth without pretending their pain didn't matter shocks people now. Everything about this hearing felt rare because it was built on something that never trends for long enough: responsibility. And months later, the final proof arrived in the form of a letter. Not to the court, to Mrs. Brooks. She brought a copy to Chambers, and with Mateo's permission, a portion was later read into the record at a community youth event. It said, "I still think about the sound the tires made. I hope I always do. Not because I want to stay ashamed, but because I never want to get comfortable with what panic can do when pride is driving. Sophia says I'm annoying now because I tell everybody to slow down. That's fair. Mr. Ferreira says I'm learning. My mom smiles more. My grandpa still yells, but now I call somebody instead of trying to be somebody I'm not yet. Thank you for being angry enough to tell the truth and kind enough to let me become different." That letter traveled. Teachers shared it. Parents quoted it. Clips from the hearing were discussed in church groups, youth programs, driver education classes, and community centers. People said the same thing over and over. This one stayed with me, because everybody recognized a piece of the story. The kid who thought pressure made him older, the mother working too much, the victims living one missed bill away from chaos, the judge holding two truths at once, the crossing guard brave enough to stay angry without becoming cruel. This was never just about a traffic case. It was about what kind of correction actually changes someone. Punishment can stop behavior for a while. Shame can silence it for a while. Fear can hide it for a while. But responsibility married to dignity, that can rebuild a person from the inside out. If you've watched this far, drop a comment telling us which line hit you the hardest, because this story gave us more than one sentence worth remembering. Maybe it was, a mistake tells me what you did, an apology tells me who you're becoming. Maybe it was, sorry is broke unless it sweats. Maybe it was, being needed is not the same as being ready. Or maybe it was the quietest line of all, spoken by a little sister who understood her brother before he understood himself. He acts mad when he's scared. That one might be the truest. Because behind so much arrogance is fear. Behind so much recklessness is panic. Behind so much I'm fine is a person begging. And not to be seen as weak. The tragedy comes when that performance reaches a steering wheel, a bottle, a fist, a trigger, a choice with consequences too heavy to undo. Mateo Alvarez was lucky. Lucky the child with the red ball lived. Lucky Mrs. Brooks moved fast. Lucky his sister got home safe. Lucky the victims wanted accountability more than destruction. Lucky Judge Caprio saw through the shrug. Lucky enough to learn the lesson without burying somebody first. And he knew it. That was the real maturity that shocked.